thinking and policy.
The Assyrian kings wanted to be king of the 4 quarters of the universe, or they wanted to be king of everything. Now, they didn't know how big the world was. Everything was them and Babylonia. And if Babylonia was outside of that, then they weren't king of the 4 quarters of the universe. So they needed, I think, perhaps to feel they controlled it.
But the people of Babylonia had no intention of being ruled by Assyria.
Babylonia refused to buy into Assyria as its overlord, and so was constantly breaking away. And Assyria tried a number of different things. They would put their own Babylonian king on, they would put the son of the Assyrian king on, the Assyrian king themselves would be the king.
Nevertheless, despite the endemic conflict between the two cultures, the Assyrians always held Babylonian civilization in high regard.
Even though the Assyrians were all-powerful, they still had a sense of cultural inferiority vis-a-vis Babylonia. They saw Babylonia as the source of the best tablets, real cuneiform culture, much as in the 19th century Americans might have looked to England as, you know, the place where you would find real English literature and drama and such.
The Assyrians also recognized a strong bond of kinship with the Babylonians.
They spoke the same language, they worshipped the same gods, they wore the same clothes. This was a sister culture, but it was a much older sister culture, and it was one that they had tremendous respect for.
But that stopped in 704 BC with the ascent to the throne of the Assyrian king Sennacherib. His army had to march south several times to put down revolts in Babylonia.
He initially set up a puppet king, and that puppet king was removed. And then he put his crown prince on the throne of Babylon. This was his loved son. He was his eldest son. It was the man who was going to become king of Assyria after him. He was doing the Babylonians, presumably he thought, a great favor by blessing them with his son.
But in 688 BC, Sennacherib's son was captured and killed by an invading army. Sennacherib blamed the Babylonians for failing to protect and defend him.
His relationship with the Babylonians got worse and worse. And in the end, he did what was unthinkable in a way, which was to go in and besiege Babylon. And he was brutal to it.
Sennacherib has left us his own chilling account of the campaign. He wrote, "I pressed upon the enemy with the onset of a raging storm. I decimated the enemy host with arrow and spear. All their bodies I bored through like a sieve. I cut their throats like lambs."
He destroyed the city. He burned down buildings, he razed temples. He took the statues of gods and had his soldiers destroy them. Now, this is complete desecration. It's sacrilege. And he cursed the city. He said, no one can rebuild Babylon for 70 years.
The depths of Sennacherib's revenge terrified the Assyrians, who thought that the carnage of Babylon's destruction risked divine wrath. Even the king's closest relatives hated him.
He was killed by his own son. And there are 2 stories about how he died. One was that he was stabbed, and the other one was that the son took one of those enormous statues of a bull and toppled it on his father. So he was crushed underneath this heavy, heavy stone sculpture. What a horrible way to go.
Upon Sennacherib's death, his youngest son, Esarhaddon, became king of Assyria in 680 BC. He wanted to rebuild the city of Babylon immediately, mend fences with the citizens, and correct the huge mistake he believed his father had made. Yet he also realized that he would not outlive the 70-year curse, recorded for posterity on a clay tablet in the archives. In desperation, Esarhaddon consulted the priests, and they told him something extraordinary.
He discovered it wasn't 70 years after all, that they had been reading the tablet upside down. And in fact, it was 11 years, because in the way that numbers are written in cuneiform, 70, if you turn it upside down, is 11. And there it is. All they had to wait was 11 years.
Then Esarhaddon commanded that Babylon be rebuilt. He used the booty he gained from his conquest of Egypt to finance the construction. When Esarhaddon died in 669 BC, he left his eldest son, Ashurbanipal, a kingdom that stretched from Egypt to Persia. This man was one of Mesopotamia's most cultured rulers. He was passionate about history and archaeology and loved poetry and literature.
He said, I, Ashurbanipal, who can read and write, and he wanted to have a collection of all the literary works in his kingdom, and he wanted it to be in his palace at Nineveh.
Ashurbanipal sent agents to seek out cuneiform tablets in the archives and schools of the Babylonian temples, which contained all the history and literature of the then-known world. His scribes meticulously copied and catalogued some 20,000 texts before depositing them in what was the world's first library in his beautiful capital city of Nineveh. Among the entire collection, Ashurbanipal valued especially the 30 or so omen texts that predicted his future. One, for example, reads, "If the constellation Aries is faint, the king will encounter misery. If the stars of Orion sparkle, someone influential will get too much power and commit evil deeds."
Most of the tablets had to do with the kinds of omen divination that was important for him if he was to rule properly in accord with the will of the gods and really survive as king.
Ashurbanipal was a fine scholar and a great patron of the arts, but he was also the military leader of his people. His reign marked the zenith of Assyrian splendor, and under his command, the empire controlled the entire Near East.
So for them, that was the universe, that was everything.
But after Ashurbanipal's death in 627 BC, new power brokers in the region would rain devastating blows down on the Assyrian Empire.
These guys are forming a pincers attack on the Assyrian heartland.
Towards the end of the 7th century BC, Babylonia was in tumult. Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king who was also the overlord of Babylon, had died. This was generally the signal to rise in revolt.
In the ancient Near East, as soon as one king died, everybody tried to break away, thinking that there would be a moment of weakness in the empire. And that's when you have a bit of chaos, because everybody wants a piece of the throne.
In 627 BC, a local leader of uncertain origin called Nabopolassar made a bid for power in Babylon.
He seems to have been a governor of Babylonia. And in the first millennium, you have a number of different ethnic groups in Babylon and Babylonia, and he is in charge of one of them. He seems to have won these skirmishes and claimed the King of Babylon title.
Professing himself a local hero and man of the people, Nabopolassar was determined to regain southern Mesopotamia's independence from Assyrian tyranny. The people rallied to his cause. In 626 BC, Nabopolassar founded a new Chaldean dynasty and started a war against the overlords. In 10 years, Nabopolassar had consolidated his hold over Babylonia, and he then began to threaten the Assyrian heartlands. At the same time, the Medes, who governed to the east, attacked Assyria along the banks of the upper Tigris.
He starts ejecting the Assyrian garrisons and then pushing north into Assyria proper. By 615, he's operating with armies in Assyria itself. And he's joined there by people pushing in from northern Iran, principally Medes. So either operating independently or in concert, these guys are forming a pincers attack on the Assyrian heartland.
In 614 BC, the Medes sacked the city of Nimrud, and a year later, under the command of their king, Cyaxares, brought down Ashur, the old spiritual and cultural center of Assyria. In 612, a coalition of Medes and Babylonians, acting in unison, marched against Nineveh, and after a 3-month siege, forced the heroic defenders to sue for peace. The once mighty Assyrian Empire was at an end.
Assyria essentially falls victim to its own